Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes fascinating sources, research papers, articles, deep background notes, and we pull out the absolute core insights for you. Think of it as your shortcut to getting really well informed on complex topics, hopefully with a few surprises along the way. Today, we are diving into something truly extraordinary, a subject that sparked debate for, well, centuries really, the Shroud of Turin. But we're not just talking about the cloth itself, no, we're focusing specifically on the medical forensic evidence. What happens when you subject this ancient artifact to modern scientific scrutiny? So our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to carefully walk through the detailed findings from, forensic scientists, medical doctors, people who've studied this thing for over 100 years now. We'll extract the key insights, the surprising facts directly from the sources we've gathered, focusing purely on what the science, the data on the linen, tells us. This isn't about belief. It's about observation and deduction.
That's exactly the plan. We're consciously setting aside questions of faith or theology for this discussion. No debates about historical authentication either. Our focus is 100% on the scientific and medical observations that come directly from the shroud image itself. We're treating the source material like data from an ancient forensic case file, almost like a patient chart from 2,000 years ago. It's not about taking sides, just understanding the what and the how of the forensic findings after decades of really quite rigorous analysis. So let's see what the evidence actually shows.
Okay, so to kick things off, let's talk about a real turning point in how the shroud was studied. For ages, people just looked at it, right? Saw these faint images. But then, 1898, this Italian lawyer, Secondo Pia, he gets permission to photograph it. And when he develops those photographic plates, well, something incredible happens. The negative image reveals this detailed, lifelike, positive image of a man, something basically hidden from the naked eye before. That moment really changed everything.
It absolutely did. And what's just astonishing is how those negatives transformed what we could see. If you look at the shroud directly, the body image is faint, kind of sepia-toned, and the bloodstains look dark, reddish-brown. But in Pia's negative, those bloodstains, they become light, almost white, and the body image flips, becoming a clear, positive, almost three-dimensional in appearance. This optical reversal is, well, it's hugely significant. It suggests the body image itself is a negative, maybe formed where parts of the body closer to the cloth left more information and recessed areas less. But the bloodstains, they're different. They seem to be direct physical deposits. So you have this unique situation, a negative body image, positive bloodstains, and that revealed incredible detail.
Right. Suddenly you can see things you couldn't before. And when you start looking closely at those negative images, both front and back, wow, a really brutal picture emerges. On the front view, the forensic analysis immediately picks up clear blood patterns. You see blood around the top of the head, on the forehead, running into the hair.
Suggesting multiple injury points there.
Exactly. And scourge marks, these small dumbbell-shaped wounds all over the chest and abdomen. Then there's this huge blood flow from a wound on the right side of the chest, a really big stain. Plus, you see blood flows on the arms, down to the wrists, especially prominent on the left wrist, kind of where you might expect a crucifixion wound exit. And the scourge marks just keep going, down the front of the legs too, above and below the knee, even blood flow at the top of the feet.
And then you flip to the dorsal image, the back view, and it's even more intense. It gives this incredibly complete picture. You've got more blood on the back of the head, more cranial trauma. The long hair seems pulled back, maybe in a ponytail, which makes sense, practically speaking.
Right, for handling during torture or burial.
Precisely. And there are these broad abrasions across the tops of the shoulders. Looks like heavy friction or pressure. But what's really striking is this distinct crossing pattern of wounds all over the back. Suggests a specific kind of instrument used repeatedly.
And that big chest wound we saw on the front.
You see evidence of it on the back, too. A large amount of pooled blood and a kind of watery fluid seems to have drained down the back, indicating it happened before the body was laid flat and then continued draining.
Okay.
The buttocks are naked, more wounds there. The scourging continues down the backs of the legs, the calves. It covers almost the entire back surface. And finally, extensive blood on the bottom of the feet, and even a distinct flow on the cloth beside the right foot. More trauma there.
So the impact of Pia's photos was just massive. It wasn't just, oh, look, a clearer picture. It kicked off, as the sources say, intense forensic evaluation.
Doctors, scientists could suddenly study these wounds, these blood flows, in great detail like never before.
Exactly. It shifted from relic to, well, a subject for rigorous scientific investigation. And this new level of detail allowed them to start building a profile, a human profile, from just this ancient piece of linen. It really was a new era. Okay, so with all this initial forensic data pouring in from the negatives, what kind of picture did scientists start building? Who was this person? They used the images, forensic calculations, even draped models with replica shrouds to figure it out. It sounds like reconstructing someone from just their imprint.
That's a good way to put it. And the picture that emerges is remarkably consistent across different studies. The man is described as having been naked, scourged, and crucified. That's the overwhelming conclusion from the trauma. Physically, the forensic estimates point to a height of around 5 feet 10 inches, that's 1.78 meters, and a weight of about 170 pounds or 77 kilograms. Crucially, the body appears anatomically well-developed and normal. No obvious prior deformities or diseases, suggests a healthy man in his prime before the trauma.
5'10". That's quite specific. And it does sound tall for a first-century Judean Jew, doesn't it? I mean, wasn't the average height lower back then?
It was generally lower, yes, maybe around 5'5" on average, so 5'10" would be considered tall. But, and this is important context our sources provide, archaeological finds muddy the waters a bit. Excavations near the Temple Mount in Jerusalem from a first-century cemetery uncovered remains of individuals who were approaching 6 feet tall, so about 1.83 meters.
Okay. So while tall, it's not actually impossible for the time and place.
Exactly. It puts the man on the shroud within the observed upper range for that population. It adds a layer of, well, plausibility.
And beyond just the physical size, are there other clues in the image about who this person might have been? Culturally, perhaps?
Yes, definitely. Mark Antonacci, in his research, summarizes several points drawn from decades of analysis that strongly suggest a Jewish identity. And these are really fascinating details.
Okay, like what?
Well, first, the physiognomy, the facial features. He's described as Jewish, with a beard, shoulder-length hair parted in the middle and gathered at the back, like a ponytail or not. These are all common traits for Jewish men in antiquity.
Right, makes sense.
Second, burial customs. There's what looks like a chin band around the jaw.
A chin band?
Yeah, it seems to be holding the mouth closed. This was a proper Jewish custom in death, a sign of respect. And his overall burial posture matches skeletons found at Qumran, that first-century Jewish community known for its distinct burial practices.
Interesting. Consistency there.
Third, the shroud itself. Using a single linen shroud was consistent with ancient Jewish burial practices, which often emphasized simplicity, unlike, say, Egyptian mummification.
Okay.
And finally, perhaps the most profound point forensically, the body wasn't washed.
Not washed. Why is that significant?
Well, there was a specific Jewish tradition of not washing the body of someone who died violently, especially if blood flowed during life and after death. Blood was seen as part of the life force. It shouldn't be removed. So the fact that the shroud has extensive, well-preserved bloodstains actually reinforces its consistency with these specific ancient Jewish practices for victims of violence. It's a powerful cultural marker.
Wow. Okay, so for you, the listener, just these initial details start painting a really vivid picture. We're moving from just an image to, well, a tangible person rooted in history, with a specific physique, potential cultural markers. What stands out to you about just this initial profile? It's already feeling less like a relic and more like a forensic document.
Right, and placing that individual profile now into the context of the ordeal, the shroud gives us this incredibly detailed record of the scourging. And we have to be clear, this wasn't just a few lashes. This was systematic, brutal, designed to inflict maximum pain, weaken the victim almost to death, but not quite kill them outright. We see traumatic injuries, front and back, starting high on the shoulders, running across the buttocks, down the backs of the legs. Almost the entire body surface is covered. The sheer density is remarkable.
And the detail goes even deeper, right? And you mentioned forensic analysis beyond just looking at it.
Exactly. Using ultraviolet light, a standard forensic tool now reveals fine scratches within the main scourge marks that you just can't see normally. In some of those dumbbell-shaped wounds, you can distinguish 3, sometimes 4, parallel scratches. Tiny details.
What did that tell us?
It confirms the beating was very severe and unrestrained, just ruthless. But, critically, the evidence suggests it was stopped before it killed him. The goal was extreme weakening and pain, not immediate death. But the immediate impact, profound shock, hypovolemic shock from blood loss, traumatic shock from the tissue damage. He would have been near collapse.
And the number of wounds is just unbelievable. 372 separate wounds. That's the count.
That's the meticulous count derived from forensic examination, yes. 159 on the front, 213 on the back. It's an immense number for one session. Speaks to a prolonged, intense beating.
And the weapon used. Consistent with something specific.
Very consistent with a Roman scourge, the flagrum. This wasn't a simple whip. The analysis suggests the one used here likely had 3 leather strips, and each strip ended with 2 small weighted balls, probably iron, maybe with bone chips embedded, designed to tear flesh, not just bruise.
Those fine scratches under UV light. That fits with the tearing action.
Precisely. It suggests the tearing as the instrument was pulled away, a forensic signature of that specific kind of weapon.
And we know what these things look like from archaeology.
We do. A typical Roman flagrum had maybe an 8-inch wooden handle. The leather strips often varied slightly in length.
Why vary the length?
Cleverly or brutally, it was to stop the metal balls hitting each other during the swing. This meant maximum energy transfer on impact with the victim's body. No wasted force.
Wow, that's grimly efficient.
It is. And some scientists, looking really closely at the angles of the wounds, especially on the upper back, they've hypothesized maybe 2 people delivered the beating. Yeah, possibly one taller than the other, standing on either side, delivering blows from different angles, creating that crisscross pattern, suggests a very methodical, sustained torture.
The physical effects of that kind of beating must have been devastating.
Utterly profound. The blunt force trauma alone could easily have caused a collapsed lung, a pneumothorax, or hemothorax. But even if that didn't happen, just breathing afterwards, it would likely have been excruciatingly painful. Think about the deep muscle damage, the torn skin, the blood loss, the bruising affecting the chest wall. Every breath would be agony. He was already on the brink before even facing the cross.
Okay, so moving from that horrific body trauma up to the head, the shroud shows another distinct set of injuries there, too.
Yes, quite distinct. What we see are multiple puncture wounds, and they seem to encircle the entire skull area. This pattern is highly consistent with the idea of a crown of thorns, but perhaps not just a simple band, more like a cap or helmet woven from thorny branches pressed down onto the whole scalp.
Which would cause bleeding all over.
Exactly. The scalp is extremely vascular. And we see clear blood flows coming from these wounds, especially visible on the forehead. Rivulets of blood, indicating fresh bleeding when the body was in contact with the cloth. The paths of the blood are quite clear.
Now, the journey to the crucifixion site itself often involved carrying the cross, or part of it. Does the shroud show evidence of that?
It does. There are very clear abrasions on both shoulders, right and left, and also across the nape of the neck. Significant marks, not just light scrapes. Looks like prolonged friction and pressure from something heavy and rough.
Consistent with carrying. What exactly? The whole cross?
More likely the patibulum, which is just the horizontal cross piece. A full cross could weigh up to 175 pounds, likely too much for someone already severely weakened. The patibulum alone might weigh 60, maybe up to 100 pounds. Typically, it would be laid across the shoulders, behind the head, with the arms tied or secured to it.
Ah, okay. And that position would explain the shoulder abrasions.
Precisely. The rough wood grinding against the already damaged skin under that significant weight, it fits the evidence perfectly.
And this leads to another set of really striking injuries, doesn't it? Facial trauma and evidence of falls.
Yes, very compelling evidence. The nose on the shroud image looks distorted. Swollen, deviated, maybe broken.
Broken nose.
Forensic medical experts agree it looks swollen and deviated, consistent with a significant impact. There's also swelling on both cheeks, and a specific triangular wound on the right cheek. Looks like focused blunt force.
How would those happen?
Well, think about carrying that patibulum with your arms tied outstretched. If you stumble and fall forward.
You can't break your fall. You go down face first.
Exactly. No way to protect your face. And this theory gets strong support from other findings on the shroud. There are clear lesions, abrasions on the front of the knees, and significantly, analysis found embedded dirt particles on both the knees and the nose.
Dirt from hitting the ground.
It strongly suggests direct, repeated contact with the ground during falls. The swollen right cheek is also very consistent with hitting the ground hard, unprotected during such a fall.
But could the facial injuries also be from just being beaten, like the accounts in the Gospels?
That's certainly possible and important to consider. Direct blows to the face are described. Spitting, striking. Roman guards were notoriously brutal, so it's quite plausible, even likely, that both things contributed. Repeated falls and direct beating. The shroud might show the cumulative result of all that trauma to the face and head.
And the knees. More detail there.
Yes, the knee injuries show a braiding and denuding of the skin, basically, scraping the skin away. Consistent with hitting rough ground repeatedly, there's also swelling suggesting a bad contusion, a deep bruise. Some forensic doctors even think it looks consistent with a fracture of the kneecap.
A fractured kneecap. That would make walking, let alone carrying anything, absolute agony.
Immensely painful and debilitating. It just adds layer upon layer to this picture of extreme suffering, even before the crucifixion itself.
You know, it's chilling when you realize the word excruciating literally comes from Latin ex cruce, meaning from the cross. That tells you something about how this form of execution was viewed. And the shroud seems to provide direct forensic evidence of that very torment.
It really does. The nailing depicted on the shroud aligns remarkably well with what we know about Roman crucifixion methods. Now, the exact entry point of the nail in the hand isn't perfectly clear because we mainly see the back of the left hand. But the blood flow patterns are key. They strongly suggest the exit wound was in the wrist area, likely between the small carpal bones.
Not the palm, like in many traditional artistic depictions.
Likely not the palm, no. And this is where biomechanics comes in, and it's crucial.
Right. Experiments have shown. What?
Experiments using cadavers have demonstrated pretty conclusively that nailing through only the palms just wouldn't work. The flesh and small bones there aren't strong enough to support a body's weight, especially a struggling one.
The hand would just tear away from the nail.
Exactly. It wouldn't provide a stable anchor. Crucifixion wouldn't be feasible that way.
So how did they make it work? How did they ensure the person stayed fixed?
Forensic scientists and archaeologists suggest they had to drive the nail through the more solid bone structure of the wrists, the carpal bones. The typical Roman nail used for this was substantial. Iron, tapering, four-sided, maybe up to 7 inches long, with a decent-sized head.
Driving that through the wrist?
Would provide a secure anchor point, yes. But the damage to nerves, like a median nerve, and the tissue trauma would be immense, unimaginable pain. So the shroud's depiction of wrist wounds fits perfectly with the brutal anatomical and mechanical realities of how crucifixion actually had to be carried out.
And the feet. The evidence suggests they were nailed too.
Yes, the shroud evidence is consistent with the feet being nailed. There are extensive blood flows around the foot area, especially on the soles, and blood spilling onto the cloth beside the right foot. Clear signs of impalement trauma.
How exactly were they nailed? Is that clear?
That part is a bit more open to interpretation, according to the sources. Roman practices could vary. One common interpretation, often cited by shroud researchers, is that one foot was placed over the other, maybe left over right, and a single long nail driven through both into the vertical post, the stipes.
Okay.
However, archaeology has shown other methods too. The skeleton of Yehohanan, found near Jerusalem, had his feet nailed separately through the heel bones, turned outwards with the nail bent over.
So, different techniques, but the same outcome.
Essentially, yes. Regardless of the precise method, the sources are unanimous. The nailing of the feet would have been excruciatingly painful. And the blood flows we see on the shroud are consistent with either method, causing profound trauma to the feet. Now, putting it all together, the nailed wrists, the nailed feet, the shroud gives us these incredible insights into the actual posture of the man on the cross and the biomechanics of his suffering. One really specific detail comes from analyzing the blood flow from the left wrist wound, how gravity affected it.
What does that tell us?
Forensic analysis suggests that to get that specific flow pattern, the arms must have been raised at an angle of about 20 degrees from the horizontal when he was hanging in the death position.
20 degrees, not straight out.
Slightly elevated, yes. And that precise angle calculation comes from looking at how the blood ran against gravity. It's quite a specific deduction.
And hanging like that. What does that do to the body?
The implications are severe. The sources strongly indicate the shoulders were likely dislocated.
Both shoulders dislocated.
Likely, yes. Pulled out of joint by the body's weight, hanging from the outstretched arms. That alone would be an immense source of additional unbearable pain. And just hanging in that position, even without dislocated shoulders, causes extreme pain in the arms and shoulders from the constant tension. Plus, the body weight pulls the chest upwards and outwards, stretching it. This severely compresses the chest cavity, making breathing incredibly difficult.
Because he can't get a proper breath.
Barely. The muscles needed for breathing, the diaphragm, the intercostals, they're stretched taut, restricted. It leads to progressive asphyxia, slow suffocation.
Is there any way to relieve that?
The only way was the agonizing remedy described in the sources. Pushing up on the nailed feet.
Pushing up on the nail.
Yes, to momentarily lift the body, ease the tension on the chest, and gasp for a shallow breath. But doing so meant putting immense pressure on the wounds in the feet, causing excruciating pain there. It just joined one agony to another. Any movement brought renewed pain, exhaustion, profuse sweating. There was simply no middle ground where the agony would subside, just this relentless cycle of suffocation and pain until complete collapse.
So after all of that, the scourging, the falls, the crucifixion itself, what does the forensic evidence suggest was the actual cause of death?
Yeah, that's the ultimate question, isn't it? And obviously, without a body for autopsy, it's an inference based on the evidence preserved on the shroud. But the overwhelming consensus, the weight of the forensic work, points towards death resulting from a combination of factors, primarily hypovolemic and traumatic shock.
Hypovolemic shock.
Yeah.
That's from blood loss,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, also known as hemorrhagic shock. It happens when you lose a significant amount of blood and body fluids, maybe more than 20%. This could be from the obvious bleeding during scourging and nailing, but also from severe fluid loss through sweating, dehydration, and fluid leaking into damaged tissues during the prolonged agony. Eventually, the heart just can't pump enough blood to keep the vital organs supplied. That, combined with the traumatic shock from the sheer physical brutality of the entire ordeal, it leads to a systemic collapse, organ failure, and death. It's a cumulative effect. Now, there's that very prominent wound on the right side of the chest we mentioned earlier. Looks like a spear or lance thrust. What's really compelling forensically is that on the back image, the dorsal image, you see evidence of a large volume of blood and a separate watery fluid that apparently flowed from this wound and pooled under the body.
So blood and watery fluid, separate.
And the analysis strongly indicates this wound was inflicted after death. It's post-mortem.
How do they know it was post-mortem?
Lack of vital reaction signs, primarily, and the nature of the flow. A post-mortem thrust into the chest cavity, which Roman soldiers often did to confirm death, is entirely consistent with releasing not just residual blood, but also what's described as a massive pleural effusion of fluid from the area around the heart.
A pleural effusion. What's that?
It's a buildup of seroless watery fluid in the space between the lungs and the chest wall. This fluid would likely have accumulated during the ordeal due to the immense trauma. The scourging, the crucifixion, the potential heart strain. It would cause fluid to leak from capillaries into the chest cavity and maybe the pericardial sac around the heart. So when the lance pierced that area after death, it released both the remaining blood and the significant volume of accumulated clear, watery fluid. This separation of blood and water is a key medical finding.
Another interesting point, or perhaps an interesting absence of a point, is the legs. The shroud shows no evidence the legs were broken, right?
That's correct. And that absence is significant when you consider Roman crucifixion practices.
Why? Do they usually break the legs?
Sometimes, yes. It was a practice called crucifixion. They'd use a heavy mallet or club to shatter the lower leg bones. The purpose was to hasten death. If the victim couldn't push up with their legs anymore to breathe, they would suffocate very quickly. It also induced further shock.
So the fact that the legs on the shroud victim aren't broken?
Exactly. It implies there was no need to hasten death. If the soldiers already knew he was dead, perhaps confirmed by the lance thrust, breaking the legs would be pointless. So the unbroken legs fit perfectly with the post-mortem nature of the chest wound. It's another piece of internal consistency in the evidence. And here's another one of those subtle details that carries surprising weight. The shroud image only shows 4 fingers on each hand. The thumbs aren't visible.
Right. They look like they're folded under the palms.
Precisely. Folded inward, hidden. And there's a compelling neurological explanation for this.
From the nailing.
Very likely. Forensic scientists suggest that driving a large nail through the wrist area, where the median nerve passes through the carpal tunnel, could easily damage that nerve. The median nerve controls the thumb movement, specifically opposition and flexion.
So damaging it would cause the thumb to.
It could cause an involuntary spastic contraction, pulling the thumb tightly in towards the palm, folded underneath the fingers. It wouldn't be able to extend outwards.
Wow, that's incredibly specific.
Yeah.
Adds another layer of medical realism, doesn't it? Something an artist without anatomical knowledge might easily miss or get wrong.
It really does. It's a subtle but powerful piece of forensic data consistent with the specific trauma of wrist nailing. Hashtag 4.5, the confirmation of human blood. Of course, underlying all this interpretation of wounds and trauma is a fundamental question. What are these stains? Are they even blood? And the answer, confirmed scientifically, is yes, it is actual human blood. This is a cornerstone finding.
And that confirmation came from the Serb team back in 1978.
Yes, the Shroud of Turin research project. They took numerous tape samples directly from the shroud, including blood stain areas. 2 key researchers, biophysicist John Heller and chemist Alan Adler, published results in 1980 confirming the presence of blood components, ruling out simple pigments like paint.
A major step.
Huge. And they went further in 1981 using serological techniques, basically using antibodies to detect specific proteins. They identified key human blood serum proteins like albumin and immunoglobulin G, an antibody. The results were definitive. The blood is primate, specifically human.
So not paint, not animal blood, actual human blood.
Correct. Which solidifies the biological reality of the markings and firmly places the analysis within the realm of forensic science. Tag 4.6, the body in rigor mortis.
Okay, one final point about the state of the body itself when it made contact with the shroud. What can we tell from the image about that?
Most forensic experts who study the image agree. The body appears to be in a state of rigor mortis.
Rigor mortis, the stiffening after death.
Exactly. It typically sets in a few hours after death and makes the muscles and joints rigid. And the dorsal image, the back view, is particularly telling. The body is depicted as rigid. You can see this especially in the buttocks area. There's no flattening you'd expect if a flaccid body was simply resting its weight on the cloth.
So the body retained its shape, it didn't slump?
Precisely. It suggests the body was stiff when placed on or wrapped in the shroud.
What does that imply about the timing?
It suggests a relatively swift removal from the cross and placement in the shroud, perhaps as rigor was setting in or fully established, but before it passed, which takes a day or more. And the fact that the image itself was somehow formed while the body was in this rigid state, well, that adds yet another layer to the whole mystery of image formation itself, though that's beyond our scope today. But the rigidity is a key forensic observation about the body's state.
Well, we have certainly taken a deep dive today into just the medical forensic evidence related to the Shroud of Turin, and the layers of detail are just incredible. It paints this remarkably consistent and frankly harrowing picture of torture and crucifixion.
It really does. When you look at all the findings together, the scourge marks, the specific nailing sites, the evidence of falls, the chest wound details, the blood chemistry, the rigor mortis, it all consistently describes a victim who endured this very specific sequence of events, immense suffering leading to death, and specific post-mortem handling. It almost reads like a forensic report from 2 millennia ago.
For you, the listener, we hope this focus purely on the forensic lens has been illuminating. It really shows how modern science can be applied to these ancient mysteries, revealing details you'd never expect.
Absolutely. It's a testament to interdisciplinary work, medicine, physics, chemistry, history, all converging on this one object. And maybe it leaves us with a final thought. What else might ancient artifacts like this reveal about our past, about human experience, if we approach them with this kind of rigorous, impartial scientific inquiry? The potential for discovery is really quite profound.